right, so I believe that as a Christian, I think we all want to do great things for the kingdom of God. And so by a show of hands, who just kind of had that thought or felt like, oh, I really want to do great things for the kingdom. I really want to be effective for Jesus Christ because he died for me. Yeah. I think that's a huge part of our walk with Christ. And so if everyone could turn to Exodus 2:11. I'm reading out of the New Century Version. I don't think anyone in this room has it, but our Bibles are pretty similar, so just kind of play along with me. So Exodus 2:11 says, Moses grew and became a man. One day he visited his people and saw that they were forced to work very hard. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew man, one of Moses' own people. Moses looked all around and saw that no one was watching, so he killed the Egyptian and hid his body in the sand. Then it says, the next day Moses returned and saw two Hebrew men fighting each other. He said to the one that was in the wrong, why are you hitting one of your own people? The man answered, who made you our ruler and judge? Are you going to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Moses was afraid and thought, now everyone knows what I did. When the king heard what Moses had done, he tried to kill him, but Moses ran away from the king, and he went to live in the land of Midian. There he sat down near a well. So it seems that Moses was beginning to kind of pick up on something, that he was gaining a knowledge that I believe that the Lord put on his heart and in his head of people being mistreated, and starting to figure out that there was a little bit more to life than maybe just him or the way that he was living. And I believe that he began to understand that there's people out there suffering, and there's people out there that need to be reached, people that weren't as privileged as him. So the first point today is recognize that it's not about you. When it comes to being effective for the kingdom, I think that's the first step that we have to take, is recognizing that it's not about us. But if you want to be effective for the kingdom, you have to be willing to play whatever role it is that God has you to play, and realize that it's bigger than just you. And that might sound silly that sometimes we need to realize that there's actually people around us, because there's so much going on. Moses had a job as well. He had stuff he needed to do. He was well treated, but he still had a job. And he began to realize that there's actually people around me. There's actually people that need a little something more. So moving on, let's all turn to Exodus 3:1-6. It says, one day Moses was taking care of Jethro's flock. Jethro was the priest of Midian and also Moses' father-in-law. When Moses led the flock to the west side of the desert, he came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire coming out of a bush. Moses saw that the bush was on fire, but it was not burning up. So he said, I will go closer to the strange thing. How can a bush continue burning without burning up? Then the Lord saw Moses was coming to look at the bush. God called to him from the bush, Moses, Moses, and Moses said, here I am. Then God said, do not come any closer, take off your sandals, because you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Moses covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. And so, it's funny because Moses ended up in Midian years later. Yet God still met Moses where he was at. There was work to be done in Egypt, and maybe he didn't have to flee, maybe he would have been killed. But I like how years later God still meets Moses where he's at, and I think that's a testimony that God wants to give some people today, is that he's going to meet you where you're at. You might be waiting patiently, tirelessly. You may not understand the kind of season that you're in, but God's going to meet you exactly where you were at. And so when we look at this passage, when God says, take off your sandals because you are standing on holy ground. The second point that I have for you guys today is surrender what hinders you, even if it means taking an uncomfortable risk.
Amen.
I think that's what the Lord was trying to show me, is that taking off his sandals was like surrendering something. He said, take off your sandals because this is holy ground. I need you to get rid of this before you can enter into my presence. Before I can tell you what it is that I want you to do. Before I can give you instruction. So I don't know what everyone's going through. I don't know what our sandals are. But let's begin, that second point, let's begin to start thinking about what are our sandals? What is it that might be keeping us from entering into the presence of the Lord? What is it that besets us? And I think for me, as far as personal testimony goes, I had so many things that were holding me back from what the Lord wanted to do in my life and how the Lord wanted to raise me up so I could become effective for the kingdom. And I remember after my missions trip, sitting down with my parents and saying, you know, these were the things that I went through. Pornography, partying, drinking. You know, it was hard to say, but surrendering isn't easy. Taking a risk isn't easy. But there's promise behind that. There's purpose behind it. God doesn't ask you to take risk for nothing. And the purpose may not come, and the promise may not come as soon as you do that. But that's all right, because God he's never finished with us.
Amen.
He's always going to come through. You just have to, you know, this is how we learn to wait on the Lord. This is what builds our faith. That second point, surrender what hinders you, even if it means taking an uncomfortable risk. We all turn to Exodus 3:7-12. The Lord said, I have seen the troubles of my people, and my people have suffered in Egypt, and I have heard their cries, and when the Egyptian slave masters hurt them, I am concerned about their pain. And I have come down to save them from the Egyptians. I will bring them out of the land and lead them to the good land with lots of room and a fertile land. It is the land of Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, and Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a lot of ites in Exodus. And I have heard the cries of the people of Israel, and I have seen the way the Egyptians have made. I've heard the cries of the people of Israel, and I have seen the way the Egyptians have made life hard for them. So now I am sending you to the king of Egypt. Go, bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, I am not a great man. How can I go to the king and lead the Israelites out of Egypt? God said, I will be with you. This will be the proof that I'm sending you. After you lead the people out of Egypt, all of you will worship me on this mountain. So, here, especially after verse 7, all the way through, even up to chapter 4, we begin to see a pattern with Moses. He's reluctant. And so let's go on down to 13. Moses said to God, when I go to the Israelites, I will say to them, the God of your fathers sent me to you. What if the people say, what is his name? What should I tell them? Here we go again. It's that pattern. It's that questioning God. How are you going to do this? What are you going to do? How in the world am I supposed to be effective? Then God said to Moses, I am who I am. When you go to the people of Israel, tell them, I am sent me to you. God also said to Moses, this is what you should tell the people. The Lord is the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He sent me to you. This will always be my name, by which people from now on will know me. Go and gather the older leaders and tell them this. The Lord, the God of your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me. He said, I cared about you in Egypt. I promised I would take you out of your troubles in Egypt. I will lead you to the land, the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a fertile land. The older leaders will listen to you, and then you and the older leaders of Israel will then go to the king of Egypt and tell him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, appeared to us. Let us travel 3 days into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go. Only a great power will force him to let you go. So I will use my great power against Egypt. I will strike Egypt with all the miracles that will happen in that land. After I do that, he will let you go. I will cause the Egyptians to think well of the Israelites. So when you leave, they will give gifts to your people. Each woman should ask her Egyptian neighbor and the Egyptian woman living in her house for gifts. Silver, gold, and clothing. You should put those gifts on your children when you leave Egypt. In this way, you will take with you the riches of the Egyptians. That's pretty promising. That's a whole rant. That's an essay from God saying, I'm going to take care of you. I mean, this guy's already speaking to a burning bush. He's speaking to a miracle right in front of him. He's gaining all of these promises, but still back and forth. It's not so easy for him. He's not understanding it. He's not getting it. So here we go again. Then Moses answered, what if the people of Israel do not believe me or listen to me? What if they say the Lord did not appear to you? The Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? Moses answered, it is my walking stick. The Lord said, throw it on the ground. So Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake. Moses ran from the snake, but the Lord said to him, reach out your hand and grab the snake by its tail. When Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, it again became a stick in his hand. The Lord empowered him. The Lord said, this is so that the Israelites will believe that the Lord appeared to you. I am the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Then the Lord said to Moses, put your hand inside your coat. Okay, got to do this again before Moses can even try and question it. And so, now put your hand inside your coat. So Moses put his hand inside his coat. When he took it out, his hand was, he became a leper and he had a skin disease. And God said, now put your hand back inside your coat again. So Moses put it back inside again, and when he took it out, his hand was healthy again, like the rest of the skin. Then the Lord said, if the people do not believe you or pay attention to the first miracle, they may believe you when you show them the second miracle. After these two miracles, if they still do not believe you or listen to you, take some water from the Nile River and pour it on the dry ground. The water will become blood when it touches the ground. Again, but Moses said to the Lord, please, Lord, I have never been a skilled speaker. Even now, after talking to you, I cannot speak well. I speak slowly, and I can't find the best words. Then the Lord said to him, who made a person's mouth, and who makes someone deaf or not able to speak? Or who gives a person sight or blindness? It is I, the Lord. Now go, I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say. Okay, right? Right? Most of us would be like, okay, yeah, you know the story. This guy's reluctant, isn't he? He keeps going back and forth. Then Moses said, please, Lord, send someone else. The Lord became angry with Moses and said, your brother Aaron from the family of Levi is a skilled speaker. He is already coming to meet you, and he will be happy when he sees you. God already had the backup plan because he knew what Moses was going to do. He knew that Moses was going to keep going back and forth, and I can't do this. I don't know, how's this supposed to happen, and keep questioning God. And I said, that's all right, You will speak to Aaron and tell him what to say. I will help both of you to speak and will teach you what to do. Aaron will speak to the people for you. You will tell him what God says, and he will speak for you. Take your walking stick with you and use it to do miracles. After that, it says Moses went on. Thank God. No more questioning. God took care of all his needs and all of his worries. But let's go back to verse 12 in chapter 4. The Lord says, now go, I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say. This story could have been different. This testimony could have been different. God says, I will, after every single miracle that God had already done right in front of Moses, the burning bush, the bush hadn't burned up, the stick turning into a snake, and him putting his hand in his coat, pulling it out, having a disease, putting it back in, and he was healed. God offered him another miracle and said, I will heal you. I will teach you how to speak. He was offering him testimony. Moses turned it down. That's all right because he was still obedient. Point 3, obedience. How many of us in this room have been given instruction by God and find it too good to be true, and so we keep asking him and questioning him for different things and for different signs and wonders? That first test just isn't good enough, so God, I need to see more. How many of us can actually say that we wouldn't have done the same thing? That we wouldn't have turned down the miracle that God was offering us after showing us so many things and saying, no, I can use you, I can do this through you, and pass it off and say someone else is going to do this. Someone else is going to take care of this. If you want to be effective, you will listen to the voice of the Lord, and you will heed his voice, and you will obey each and every single part of what he's asking you to do.
Amen.
But he will use someone else.
Yes.
Moses could have said again, you know what, I don't really want to go with Aaron. God probably would have been like, okay, I'll just use Aaron. That's fine. Moses goes on his way and we don't know the rest of the story. But he was still obedient. God gave him another chance because he still wanted to bring testimony to this man's life. So obey and execute under his authority. And so, the last point that I want to leave you guys with is to share the testimony. After you've realized that it's not about you, you've surrendered everything to the Lord, you've obeyed and you've executed. What's the next step after that? The next step is to share your testimony, to share miracles. And so for some of you guys that are like, oh, okay, well, there's not really any evidence of Moses sharing his testimony. Well, who wrote Exodus? Moses did. He shared his testimony. The Lord used him so mightily. And when you go further throughout Exodus, you see all the miracles. Moses was a miracle child. He was saved after every Hebrew child was being sent for, every firstborn was being sent for to be killed. He was a miracle himself, whether he realized it or not. He used to create different plagues, frogs, gnats, the livestock of the Egyptians that was killed off, and the Hebrew livestock that was saved. We kind of see this pattern as we go on throughout Exodus, that it seems like Moses was starting to get it. Moses was starting to realize that it was more than just about him, that there was more to life than Moses, but there was a people that needed to be saved. And as we read on, we see that he began to become more and more obedient to the Lord and do those things that no one else would have done. He became more and more sold out to the calling of God. And so that's another part of being effective is selling out, is giving in to the will and letting him grow you and stretch you. Because it didn't just get easier for Moses per se, but it was easier because he began to understand how the Lord worked, that the Lord was not there to punish him or to just deliver all of these hardships on his life, but the Lord was actually there for him, and the Lord wanted to use him in such a mighty way. And he said, okay, it's not that much about me, I just want to be used by God because I've seen the miracles and I've seen what the Lord can do in my life, and I know that he can do it in an entire people group.
Amen.
And used to save an entire people group. A man that was so imperfect and questioned God so much. Had all these miracles. you go through those steps, review or recognize that it's not about you. Surrender what hinders you. Give it up. Obey and execute, do the Lord's work, and share what the Lord has done. This message isn't just for people that have had that vision and feel like they can't get it back. It's for those people. It's for the people that are actively seeking God but are a little bit confused too. It's for each and every single type of person in this room. Think about how can we be more effective for the kingdom of God, because it's more than just us. It's more than just Action Christian Chapel. It's more than just White. It's more than just Sheen. It's more than just Pastor Amos. What can God do with just a group of people in this room? You saw what he did with one man. One man that was obedient, able to sell out to the calling. One man that knew that it was more than just about him. What can God do with a church like this? What can God do with people that get it because they understand that they themselves will never get it? Now, that might have gone over some people's heads, so I'll run that back. But what can God do with people that get it because they understand that they themselves will never get it? What do you do when you yourself don't get it? You seek help. So for us as Christians, where does our help? Our help comes from the Lord.
Yes.
And for those that might be a little bit nervous about stepping into a journey like this, just remember it's a marathon, not a sprint. And all of our marathons finish at different times. My marathon doesn't look like his. That's why I didn't go play football and he did. That was part of his journey, it wasn't part of mine. My marathon doesn't look like anyone else's in this room. My marathon is going to be worth it. As long as I keep my eyes on the one who saved me, the one who set me free. Everyone in this room, believe it or not, everyone in this room has a step on Moses. Moses didn't have the Bible to go turn to or all these stories and continually see what the Lord had done. That's why I say, what can God do with people in this room? What can God do with our lives for us that have constant examples? Because it's not just Moses. This sermon could have been done on a bunch of other people in the Bible.
That's right.
What can God do with our lives? People that have seen miracles. People that have heard of these miracles. Because Moses was just an average guy. He was an Egyptian. He wasn't supposed to end up here. It wasn't supposed to play out like that. God had a plan for him, though.
Amen.
A plan for someone that didn't have so many examples. We have a whole book of examples. And so I'd also encourage everyone, if you're not in the Word, to be in the Word. It's encouraging. It gives us life. It gives us new perspective. The way that God uses His Word to bless us, to heal us, and to encourage us to be used in different ways. It's more than I think any of us could ask. And so, for the people in here who feel like, okay, this message might have been for me, I want to be effective for the kingdom. We're just going to go back into the time of worship.